you didn't see what was happening before in our last episode, in our first interview, 1979 finds a couple things going on. In 1977, the FBI had raided Big Blue, the Cedars-Sinai complex of Scientology, which at the time had all kinds of, operational intelligence information and stuff, because the church had its own intelligence wing, which at that time was called the Guardian's Office. And they had been engaged in covert operations against the United States government in an effort to cleanse the files of the government, not just the United States government. This was also happening in other places, but most spectacularly, they got busted in the United States because they were trying to sneak into these buildings, make copies of all the files, remove files, take out documents, and basically scrub the government files, which is kind of the mind of those organizations, of anything that was bad or critical of Scientology and L. Ron Hubbard. And this was called the Snow White program, to make L. Ron Hubbard's name, pure as Snow White. So they had gotten busted. The FBI had gotten wind of this. There had been a guy who'd gotten caught being somewhere he wasn't supposed to be, at the IRS headquarters, I think, in D.C., in the library there. And that led to one thing, led to another, and this whole bust happens. So Scientology is getting its name smeared properly and correctly in the headlines for criminal activities. And there were 11 Scientologists who were indicted for conspiracy, fraud, various things. There was a whole laundry list of charges. And Mary Sue Hubbard, L. Ron Hubbard's wife, was one of those 11. So this was a huge deal. This was not a small thing. And it wasn't just some little local thing. It was naming L. Ron Hubbard himself as an unindicted co-conspirator. So now let's go to 1979, when, this is still in tumultuous investigation and things are going on, and Scientology's quote unquote good name is not really so good anymore. And we find L. Ron Hubbard in a place called La Quinta, or La Quinta. I'm not really sure exactly what the right pronunciation is there, but it's a place in California near Palm Desert, and it's kind of situated between the San Bernardino National Forest and Joshua Tree. It's kind of about 2 hours. If you drove from Long Beach straight east, you'd end up around La Quinta, and that's where Hubbard was hiding out. He was off the radar. He did not want to be found. He did not want to have to answer for any of this, and he was an unindicted co-conspirator. So he wasn't gonna be charged, but there was, like, if somebody would have flipped on him, he very easily could have been charged, because he clearly was the mastermind of the entire Snow White operation. Okay, so he's running Scientology behind the scenes, and he's also out there in the desert with the Sea Org members, these people who are utterly devoted to him and are working 24/7 for the cause of Scientology. That's what the Sea Org is. It's the core, clergy or ecclesiastical center of the Church of Scientology. And they're working with him, and he's out there trying to continue to advance Scientology's purposes and plans. He's not just, crying about the legal case. So he's out there making films, actually making training films for Scientology counselors. By this time, by 1979, David Miscavige is 19 years old. He was born in 1960.
Okay.
He was born to Ron Miscavige Sr. He had a brother, Ronnie Miscavige Jr., and he's got a sister, Denise, and I think there might be one other relative in there. I can't remember. And his father is an ex-military guy. He's an ex-Marine. He's a sales guy. And sometime in the early 1970s, if I remember the dates right, Ron Miscavige Sr. got involved with Scientology in Philadelphia, he was from Philadelphia. That was where David Miscavige was born. I think they were still in that area, but they might have traveled around. But the important points here are that in the early 1970s, Ron Miscavige gets involved in Scientology, starts doing classes. His son, David, has asthma, has an asthmatic condition. He's kind of a wild child. Not particularly, evil or horrible or there's no evidence of him, cutting up animals or any kind of goofy craziness like that. He had pretty pretty regular middle-class upbringing under a father who was pretty stressed. I mean, he has admitted to physical abuse of his kids and during times of stress and whatever. And so it wasn't a great, it could have been a better upbringing. But there wasn't particularly any indication from the data that we have that David Miscavige as a child or as a young adult was like he is now, so to speak. Okay. So,
okay.
But he gets involved in Scientology himself as a teenager, kind of around the same age as I did, if I remember right. And he got some auditing for this asthma condition. It was really bad asthma, and it would really put him down. And the auditing apparently helped with that. Given the fact that, and I just covered this in a video I did last week, given the fact that asthmatic conditions often have psychosomatic elements to them, it is not unheard of or improbable that some counseling could have relieved some of that asthma, which is not the same thing as saying that it cured it, because it didn't. And I believe he still has and certainly carried over with some of the asthma over the years, but Scientology apparently relieved it enough that Miscavige, young David Miscavige, was sold that this was the bomb diggity, and he wanted to do more of it. And he started doing more classes, getting more involved, and eventually, I think by the time he was 16 or 17, maybe earlier, but certainly by then, he was saying, hey, I want to go join the Sea organization and work with L. Ron Hubbard, and I want to go do that. And his father let him because he was, sold on Scientology himself. So David Miscavige goes off to go do this. And there's lots of details and stuff I'm kind of glossing over here. But basically, he ended up in the Sea Org, and he ended up rising up to get to where L. Ron Hubbard was located.